All right. Hello. Cheers. Midday random live stream. I am trying a few new things. Camera, such simpler. Anyway, I'm rendering some stuff and I didn't have much to do between. So I figured I would use my laptop and do a random stream in the middle of the day without telling anyone. At first, I tried a different stream. That was a much dumber idea. So now I'm trying a more public stream, and we'll see how it goes. I don't have any plans for the stream, but I, generally speaking, have no problem babbling on. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to throw them out there, and I'll endeavor to babble on. I have a little bit of time off, and I am wrapping up or re-wrapping a review on the Taisuki SO5. I played a little harder with it for just a minute, included some of that footage, which fortunately didn't make me have to redo everything, but I think it's a little bit more compelling a video than it was before. I broke the Fidestazan sword back there. I have that to finish up. I have a Meow Dao from an unknown. It's not Ryan sword, but it's like a Ryan sword-like thing. I'm working on that one. And then I have some pretty cool European stabby Alexandria stuff to play with. So that's what I'm working on sword-wise. Hopefully I achieve some of that this week. All right, now I'm not streaming on the StreamYard, not Yardbird. I'm not streaming on StreamYard. Trying something a little different, so I can't highlight comments the same way. If you have a question for me, I think in YouTube it helps if you @ me so they show up in orange. Otherwise, I'm easily stupefied. But I do see one here. It says, "Hey Matt, what's your favorite Suka shape and why?" I like, I'm partial to Handachi style fittings. That is not something I conveniently have an example of, unfortunately, but they don't necessarily feel great on the palm of your hand, but I like that shape of Kashira because it doesn't come off very easily. It's pretty loath to come off, and I think they look pretty fancy. In terms of general shape, though, I like a waisted shape. I can't say that I mind that. I find it to be really comfortable, but it also usually comes with some sort of cost. Often the waisted shapes are bigger to accommodate the waisting that they have, and that isn't always great. And if they're little, sometimes they can be delicate. I don't know. There's a little bit to it. I like the look of a waisted shape. I like the feel of it. Sometimes I don't like the execution or durability of it. Apart from that, I do like a slightly teardropped kind of ha side of a handle as well. I think it indexes really well, and I generally speaking prefer smaller, a little more slender a handle. But I like to hold a handle, and when I define what's a good shape for a ska, it's not just the shape, but if I can pick it up and my hand locks into place and I feel like it's not gonna fall apart, it's not loose, it feels really tight and well connected to my hand, and also then really easy to index. If it's round and I can't tell where the edge is particularly easily, that's problematic. So I don't know that there's necessarily a stereotypical shape. I can say I like the look of a waisted shape, but many other various handles that have no waisting have given me the sensation of connectedness, where the ito's tight and it's well formed and it fits in my hand well, and then indexes well. So those are things that I tend to look for. I don't know that there's necessarily a guaranteed recipe for one type of shape that's always going to do that. Sorry, part of the thing I'm testing is this ring light in front of me, and it's hard to stare into. Ooh, burning my retinas out. Luke, you're asking what is the best company to order from? That depends on what you want. I would say Cult of Athena tends to do satisfy more customers than they tend to disappoint. So if you're looking for a general place to go and purchase things, then they seem to be a good retailer. I don't have familiarity with a huge amount of other retailers. If you're looking for a place you can order a katana and get one spit out the other end, that is fantastic. Again, depends on what you're after. I've recently talked about some Evolution Blades Motohara pieces. They are fantastic, and yes, you can order from them. Otherwise, I haven't tried one, but if you're looking for a genuine blade, supposedly Tizando has some order form where you can purchase and from a licensed Japanese smith get a brand new Shinsakudo blade or genuine Nihonto piece. But I think it's like $8,000 to $10,000 to start. So that might be interesting if that's the side of things that you're after. But best company to order from, it depends. Neither one of those companies are going to help you with fish. So if you're looking to order fish, none of them are good. If you want good fish, I don't know who you can order it from. Has anyone ever asked me for some sacks? No, beep boop. Nobody has asked me for sacks. Pretty seldomly. I've had a few sacks. It is hard to avoid puns and dad jokes when I say that, but I've reviewed a few of them, and generally speaking, they are fun. It's unfortunate that they are so stabby and look like great stabby stabbers, but then generally don't have anything to stop you from riding right up the blade. So, Luke, glad it helps out. Is there value, freestyle flow, is there value in getting a larger ska for an above height guy? No, but maybe. I would say that's something that you're going to need to vet and check on yourself. But grab a stick, go buy a pole from Home Depot or something like that, and try figuring out about how long you like things. Despite I'm not a small man. I'm not the tallest guy though, but I still prefer a handle that's around 10.5 inches. And so if it's 11 or 12 or 13 or 15, those start to get a little bit obnoxious for me. They get caught in the sleeves of my gi and mess things up when I draw, and I tend not to like them as much. So I prefer a 10.5 inch handle, but that's just me. Some people really like longer handles. Some styles prefer them or demand them. So it kind of depends on what you like. If you don't have any particular limitations based on the ryu you're studying or the school you're studying under, the requirements of the system, then the advice is just grab a pole and stick a rubber band around it and try various lengths. Try some of the swings you'll be attempting and figure out about where you like putting your hands. And that should give you some guidance on about how long you like. I thought I would like longer ones when I started, and it turns out I like little shorter ones at about 10.5 inches. And I guess I'm saying that because I'm taller. I'm a little above 6 feet. And so people would think I would like a 13 inch handle or something like that, but I don't. Anyway, Alex, I'm curious about your thoughts on a YouTube channel called Masa Tokyo Sword. I'm not sure if you've heard of them, but they advertise antique Nihonto as cheap as $400. Is it legit? No, I don't know. I'm not sure. I haven't heard of it. But in fairness, that me not having heard of it does not mean that it is not legitimate. That does not necessarily mean that's the case. So I don't know. The name isn't ringing a bell. It's possible that I've come across some of the stuff, but it's not ringing a bell. In fairness, though, I don't buy a ton of antiques. I look at them quite a lot, but it's even for somebody that has invested as much time in swords as I have, it's very easy to lose your shirt on antiques or buy flawed or problematic things that are not. It's not necessarily the value, but that have deterrence in terms of them as resellable or just not necessarily condition-wise what they appear to be. And so if I can't see them in person, I'm a lot more hesitant to buy them. And I usually have to have like an unquestionable slam dunk or buy from a vendor that I have a personal reputation or a personal relationship with. And so that tends to limit my buying on antiques quite a bit. The flip side, they do sell a lot easier. So if you're buying an antique, there's generally more of a market for it than there is, or at least there's a lot more collectors and a lot more people interested in just owning an antique than there are people interested in owning like a reproduction kind of things. But $400 doesn't inherently it doesn't mean it's not legit. Unfortunately, I've babbled on about something that the short answer is I do not know. Beep boop. Do you have any particular favorite conflict, war, or military engagement? Is there a certain historical period you enjoy more than others? That's a good question. I can't say that I'm particularly fascinated with any one battle. Obviously, medieval Japan is interesting, but I'm really more interested in the swords and how swords were used than the history of Japan. And so I would say, oddly, my interest tends to follow the object and the nuances around the object rather than the culture that inspired the object, if that makes sense. I started liking swords and then started liking Japanese swords and then started liking the things that happened around Japanese swords, the various arts. But I got interested in swords before I got interested in martial arts. And in an effort to better understand the sword, I started learning about martial arts. And to better understand swords, I learned, not that I'm a blacksmith, but like my interest in blacksmithing is around making swords. And so if there are like historical nuances about like why Japanese folks always carry their sword on the left, and like that's interesting nuance, historical information to me because it orients around swords. But like I don't have the same fascination of like where you would carry things that weren't swords, for example. But yeah, I don't know of any particular engagement that generates more interest than others. I enjoy history, but I would say not in that way. I usually just drive deep down a rabbit hole as it relates to pointy, stabby things. Hopefully that answers your question. Yeah, I have to rack my brain. Like I think I've looked into lots of different histories and different battles, but I would say most of my interest is focused probably around Japanese stuff. But that's not a particular engagement or war or conflict. So, but that is maybe the historical period that has generated the most interest on my part. Have you read the Book of Five Rings? Have you dabbled in two-sword techniques like Nitoryu? No, I have not, Alex. Part of Katori Shinto-ryu, which is one that I study, has a two-sword technique or a two-sword kata to it, but I have not gotten to do that yet. So supposedly it comes a little later, but I haven't done it. I haven't done it yet. The Book of Five Rings, yes, I have read parts of the Book of Five Rings. I don't think I finished it. It's not a big book either, which is not because it wasn't interesting. I think I picked it up and tried reading it before bed, and then I just kept falling asleep. No discredit to Musashi's writings, but I don't think it was. I think I picked the wrong time to try and read it. In terms of two swords, though, the closest other thing that I've done was in Filipino martial arts. There's the teacher called it Sinawali, and you would use two sticks, and there were various drills and things like that you would work and then have sparring, but it was typically two shorter swords or two shorter sticks that you would work with, and that was another thing that I worked on. And I would say most of the time, in attempting to do that in application, there was typically the art that I was studying in Eskrima focused a lot on attacking, and there were various defenses and opening, but I found myself gravitating and using my dumb hand to make openings and attack with my right, like a rapier and dagger might. And that was not. I never quite got the equal offensiveness of two of two swords at once. And I haven't done that in a minute, but I do remember it was fun, and I was not very good at it. One long sword seemed to be what I was better with. JC, I've had a few antiques over the years, and it's sketchy. It's a sketchy biz. Fakes are an issue. Plus, it just because it was made a long time ago doesn't mean it was made well either. That's fair. The antiques that I've had, even of a lower grade, were still, I would say, interesting. They weren't all necessarily great, fine objects, but some of them were just had characteristics in the steel that were interesting to look at and pieces to study, even though they were lower grade pieces. It's nice, at least with some antiques, that you get a better feel. I would say even the lower grade pieces were still, especially wakizashi and Japanese style stuff. I remember I had just a number of wakizashis because they were the redheaded stepchildren of antiques, and tanto and katana seemed disproportionately expensive in comparison to wakizashi. But as I compare the antiques that I've had versus the modern reproductions that I've had, even though I'd imagine a $200 wakizashi from a modern is probably has better steel and is going to hold together better than some of the more expensive antiques that I had. They still had like a proportion and weight that provided some nuance and interest in terms of study, and were generally shaped a little better, even though they had diminished substantially over time through neglect or maybe poor manufacture at the start. But yeah, I think even the bad ones still can give you some context or some information that you may be absent if the only other thing you've had access to is reproductions. First name, last name. I'm looking for a katana between $200 or $300, 28 or 29 inch. What would you buy? If you want something bedazzled and neat and bespoke to you, then I'd take a look at Jeiku. If you're budget conscious, your money tends to go a little further with Sino sword or Jeiku sword. In terms of custom options and stuff, they seem to be very effective in that regard. For durability, I'd step up a little bit and do like a Ronin Dojo Pro. I think they make a very durable sword for the money, even though you might need to lacquer the handle when you get it. And something in between, something from Cloudhammer. Those have been nice. I'm not sure how many of them are in the $300 range, but generally speaking, they're pretty decent. Yeah. The introduction of firearms into Japan was a real interesting thing to me. I need to watch more samurai movies. Medieval Japan is quite interesting. Yes. There were a lot more firearms. They seem to, at least as I understand their application historically and how they're portrayed in movies, it seems to be a little bit off, like The Last Samurai, where nobody wanted to use guns, but they probably would have used guns. Scott, thanks for the kind words about the channel. Abdallah, do you plan to order a katana from Japan? Not in the near future. I might at some point. I'm really tempted to just test the Tazando side of things. I'd really like to. Well, anyway, what's the best way to say this? Buying an antique from a dealer is not super helpful. I might be able to buy something and then say, hey, this person is a legit dealer, and that will be helpful to an extent to people. But the thing that I get is one of a kind, and like there's not. It's not very useful, really, because you can't go buy the same thing as I'm buying. In contrast to if I get a sample from the manufacturer, then you can, in theory, go buy that thing or something very, very close to that thing and have a better idea of what that thing is when it arrives at your house. And that's really the focal point or the fixation around the channel that I have, is to better prepare buyers or better align expectations of buyers before they part with their money, right? And I think the Tazando shop linking licensed Japanese swordsmiths and having like a one-stop shop where you can go and buy a sword and then get a finished Japanese sword out the other end is just maybe the most useful thing and the most similar. Well, God, why can't I make words with my mouth? You would be able to go to one stop and buy a sword and come out the other end, and potentially you could get a sword not terribly dissimilar to the one I bought and have a similar experience, and it may be a lot more valuable. And it's not that that is impossible to do now. There are certainly other shops in Japan, but it's not as connected, and it's not from a store that's as reputable, and it doesn't seem to offer the same, kind of similarity to the way other people shop for swords now. So in the future, I'd like to do that. The downside is it's $10,000 and I don't need one. And I don't think they're interested in providing a review sample. So I would really like to. That would be a thing I think would be a useful video to make. Unfortunately, it comes at a budget of $10,000. And so I will need to wait a very long time before YouTube will the ad revenue from YouTube will justify doing that. But that would be fun, and I think that would be useful. And there are a lot of people, I think, that want to buy a genuine Japanese sword to have real Nihonto, not necessarily an antique, but something made traditionally and all of that kind of jazz. And having the ability to buy one at Tizando, I think would be if I were to go buy a new one, at least that would be the thing that I would like to do, and I think is in the closest alignment with the stuff that I put out on my channel. All right. I bought a Ryan 1276 for basic entry level. Did I shoot myself in the foot? I don't know that model, Jordan, but I would venture a guess no. Ryan's sword has some angry folks, some red flags, you might say, around some of the stuff they've done. But I, at the same time, had two very nice samples from them that I enjoyed. I made videos about them, and I thought they made a good sword. So if you're happy with it, then I'd say no. But all the videos and blabbing that I do on the internet should give you some indication on what stuff to look for, and if it's out of alignment with the products they sent me, then maybe, but hopefully not. Hopefully I got a good sword. Carmen Wright, hi Matt. Best all-around katana for $1,000, aesthetically good and durable and good handling. $1,000. Well, I guess it depends. It all depends. God damn it. So Huawei, I think, makes a sword for $800 or $900, and it looks very nice, even though they're not terribly unique looking, I guess I would say. So I don't think you have as many customization options, and it will likely take a very long time. But they make good, solid swords that are pretty and nice to look at, and generally feel pretty good as well, and have a lot of things that are nipped and tucked. So if you're willing to fork out that kind of money, I think that would be a solid spot to do it. If you want something more durable, and that's a little bit more important, and I get so many questions on like what kind of steel and what to do and what's durable. And if durability is a thing, then Cloudhammer Steelworks makes an S5 sword. Many moons ago, they used to be called Visor, and I got an S7 sword to test, and that was one of the most durable swords that I've tested. And so if that's really the fixation is durability, then that's the one that has gone the furthest for me. And supposedly S5 is even a little bit more shock resistant. So why is that good? Well, if you plan on whacking stupid targets like trees and metal poles, then that's good. People ask like, what's the katana for the end of days? And so that would be like a through hardened blade, ideally. And S7 or something like that, or 1060 tend to be the most durable in the sense of forgiving. They don't hold an edge necessarily better, though they do hold an edge quite a while. But they, could conceivably be whacked into trees and thrown and hit motorcycle helmets and other targets that would otherwise severely degrade another sword and hold up. So if durability, if what you mean by durability is that, then I would go that direction, because I don't think Huawei sword is going to take well to being bashed into a motorcycle helmet. But it looks nice and has a hamon and has other endearing qualities. So hopefully that helps. Shit, I lost my place on the chat because I'm not using StreamYard. I should have known better. Ratmon 32 to Zando Kita. I think if I spent $10,000 of my own hard-earned money on it, I would be pretty loath to bash it into a metal pole. Also, it would probably break pretty easy. Just to let you know that the Zando blades are genuine Japanese-made swords aren't gonna last an order of magnitude longer than the things that I'm testing as reproductions from China. So there would be a sad way to spend $10,000. However, if they sent me one with the specific instruction to destructive test it, I would happily oblige. Well, happily in a sense, and also very sadly in another sense. Alex, what is your opinion on S5 katana made from Cloudhammer? Does it compare to the L6 blades from Howard Clark in terms of performance? I haven't gotten a chance to test the S5 sword, so to be transparent about that, I don't know. But I have tested an S7, and assuming that the S5 has similar or better properties to the S7, then I would say it is not the same. It's not fair to compare like a $10,000 sword that is sent across multiple craftsmen, because Howard doesn't make the other parts on the sword, right? So the handle being fit by professionals and all the fittings being made by, it's not a fair apples to apples comparison. So in that way, no, the Cloudhammer stuff does not hold up in terms of fittings and all of that kind of thing, but it shouldn't. And I don't know that it's necessarily trying to. In terms of the steels being durable, I would say generally yes. I haven't gotten a chance to test a Howard Clark particularly hard, but I have seen them do some pretty nanners things. Sensei at the Toyama Ryu school that I go is not shy about letting people use his Howard Clark sword, and I have seen the tip whacked into the ground more times than I would like to, and each time it seems to hold up well. I've seen it deliver really bad cuts on very hard used Japanese tatami mats, and it springs back into shape and is very good. So at the same time, I haven't seen anyone try to beat a metal pole in half with a Howard Clark sword. So I don't know how well it would hold up in contrast, but I do think that the Cloudhammer S5 is, at least in theory on the market, some of the most durable stuff that you can get if that level of durability is what you're after. Freestyle Flow. I have some Sierra Nevada IPA, and this is my first one, despite my inability to form complete sentences. Nice one. Any opinion on Jayco custom swords? I mentioned it earlier, but I think they do, generally speaking, a pretty good value for the money. Sometimes it's a little harder to communicate. You have to make sure you're getting what you're asking for a little bit more. But I think out of the various companies that offer custom services, Jayco seems to offer, or Jaku, I keep saying J. I'm going to stick with Jayco. They seem to offer the best value for the money. What's going to come over? Did I lost track of chat? StreamYard is a little easier to keep track of what the hell I'm doing. I should remember that, but I thought I'd just try a new setup and hop on the YouTube streamer. Bad choices. All right. Yummy. What else? I think I'm caught up on chat, so if I'm not, feel free and throw a question out. But there'll be a video on this doowacky behind me coming up in the not too distant future. That's a sword stand from Enzo Workshop, which, if you are a member, shameless plug, there's video up already. But I happen to really like it, and as I mentioned, the sword in white on the bottom was a sword from Fidesz Design, which I can thank sword friend Mike Rizzo. He has his own channel. Plug for him as well. That he's the one that seemed to figure out how to say the name. So Fidesz Design. Anyway, I tested the sword to failure the other day, and interestingly, the handle kind of kind of exploded. But it stayed together enough where like I could use it without it hurting my hand, so I kept going. Usually handle explosions result in stopping, but yes, I kept on going, and I had that video to edit next. It looks like my Taisuke video is nearly done rendering, so I will probably not stream for too much longer because I have videos to edit while I'm taking some time off. Have you seen Ronin Katana's Meteorite Katana? It looks beautiful. I have seen the stuff they've made out of Meteorite. I recall doing it, and Chris at Ronin Katana mentioned the challenges inherent in making a Meteorite Katana, and it's beyond just the forging it out of meteorite and the things that could go wrong, but like kind of needing to supervise the process. It's an interesting story, and I think a really interesting looking sword. I would have, if a sword is forged out of a meteorite, though, I would really have loved to see fittings and stuff that were a little bit more proportional to the specialty of the blade. You know what I mean? And it seems like a lot of this stuff in China has they can make some really, really amazing blades, but it seems like the fitment quality is, the rest of the fittings really don't get the same attention. And if you look at antiques or Japanese made swords, they certainly do. The fittings are like their own rabbit hole that you can go down in terms of artistry and beauty, and I just don't see that from a lot of the stuff in China. So I would have loved to see that meteorite sword get mounted up with some like meteorite made fittings that had hand engraving, and they don't have to be super crazy, but rather than some of the stuff that gets mounted up, but which looks like just another casting used in a mold that's on a number of other swords. Alex, do you play games? If so, have you played Ghost of Tsushima? I have not played Ghost of Tsushima, which is funny. You'd think I would, but I've just kind of lost interest, I suppose, in that style of game. Not entirely, because I played The Witcher, and I don't know that Ghost of Tsushima is like fundamentally in terms of control, wandering around and whacking people with a sword, different than The Witcher. But I did enjoy that. But yeah, like the kind of action role-playing games, I've taken a little bit of a break on for whatever reason. I think probably because it's on PlayStation. Even though I have one, I never played that game. It looked beautiful. It looked really cool, but I just never did it. Nowadays, I gravitate towards like RimWorld or Civilization or I guess games like that. XCOM 2, I still play that one from time to time. And if I'm feeling like exercising my twitchy muscles, then I'll play Apex Legends and Rocket League sometimes. But those are typically the ones that I jam with. And Baldur's Gate 3 is going to come out soon. I'm looking forward to playing that one. Theoretically, it'll come out someday. It looks like it's going to be fun. I played through the like beta thing that they've had out for a while. That was a fun experience. But with kids and other things going on, I like a game where I can dabble for a minute, then pause, and then come back to. And I find that games like Ghost of Tsushima require me to have strong command of the controls and being able to move the character around, like in Dark Souls. And I just can't pause and come back to a game and like have the same kind of like twitchy skills that I need. So I've invested the time to have some of those twitchy movement control skills in Rocket League and Apex, and that's it. I can't do it. I can't. Those I seem to be able to come back to, warm up for a game, and then like be able to have fun and not feel like I have toddler hands. It's probably more info than you wanted, but there's my spiel about video games. Got about a 2-month wait on my Jayco Custom 31-inch Shobu Zakuri I placed about a week ago. I hope you like it. The Danimal, how are you doing today? I am doing fine. I hope you're doing well as well, Danimal. What do you think of katana with a false edge and a stronger curve that can be used with the spine like a warp pick. What do you think of a katana with a false edge and a stronger curve could be used? I don't know if it would be a katana then, but I'm trying to envision the thing that I don't know that mentally, like, I'm getting what you're throwing down here. I think I understand war pick, but like if the katana didn't have that had a false edge, stronger curve, and then presumably you would use it the opposite way and try to clip people with the beak, I'm guessing. Seems like it would be really heavy. Wish more long quan sword companies would use Japanese fittings. I wish more long quan sword companies would make fittings themselves. I don't personally, I don't really like the cast fittings, and I would rather have like even slightly more crudely made fittings from iron that were pressed in a hydraulic press, that are simple but like have a handmadiness to them, or that are made out of the steel chunks that are failed swords or something like that, or suba that are cut out of steel and then just patinated or something like that. I would prefer those handmade kind of fittings over what's out there now. Even though they would lack embellishment and maybe not look as good. I think one of the best fittings that I got on a sword from China was a Ryan sword katana, and they didn't have a suba that had swirly mitsudomes in it. And supposedly the shop guy made one and stuck it on, and that was one of my favorite looking suba that I've got on a Japanese sword. I think that's like one of the few pieces that I reused, and I put it on the cable steel wakizashi that I had done up in a project. So that suba came from like Ryan's sword, which is neat. So yeah, I wish I don't know that I'm set on them using Japanese fittings. It just seems like they're very capable of making their own fittings, but seem determined to use cast pieces instead. And if they could develop some skill where the economies of scale worked out to make kind of more handmade kinds of fittings, then I might. Anyway, I think that would be more interesting. I guess that's what it comes down to. For $1,000, I was thinking of the Bushido. Don't know if there's a better option out there for $1,000. If you can get a Bushido for $1,000, it's not bad. I have one over there, and I made a review on the Bushido already. I'm hesitant to like get up and walk around, but maybe I can. I don't know if I could find it. I'd make the cardinal sin of walking off stream and then trying to rummage through a closet to find a sword. But the Bushido for $1,000 is not bad. It's a well balanced sword. It just isn't particularly good at anything other than having like a nice, unique, good look to it. I think they are handsome looking swords. The pluses, you get a unique looking sword, which is nice and has very well done fittings because Hanwei excels at that. The downside is I don't know that the Bushido is particularly durable. I've found that the folded steel from Hanwei tends to be on the softer side. So if you're out whacking mats and things like that, I don't know that it's going to be as forgiving as a piece from Cloudhammer or even a piece from Huawei. The other bit is Hanwei can be a little bit hit or miss in terms of the fitment and quality, and so. But I guess I would say generally speaking, I would say Huawei does. I've not seen a really bad sword from them in terms of fitment on an $800 or $900 sword, and I've seen plenty of them on the Hanwei side of things. You do get with the Bushido better looking fittings and folded steel, and by contrast, the Huawei piece would not offer those features. But I think in terms of a sword you want to move around and party with, I would venture a guess that the Huawei is going to be a little bit better. But Bushido's pretty. I mean, it's certainly not a bad sword. Not a bad sword at all. Maybe I will try to find it. I'm going to break the stream rules and walk off the camera and try to find the Bushido since now I'm wondering where it is. Where is my Bushido? Know where the swords are? No. Hey there. Yee. I found it. That took not as long as I thought it would. This one has a little bit of a slenderer handle than some of the other Bushidos do, and I don't know why they chose to make it with such little bitty fittings, but it's a comfortable feeling sword. It's very pretty. I always liked these kind of falling cherry blossoms speckled around the sword and this bronzy metallic look. This one as well has, which you're probably not going to be able to see particularly well in the streaming camera that I have here, but it's got like a little bit more of a white buffalo horn. Sometimes they're white, sometimes they're black. They seem to try and put, if available, the whiter or more lighter colored buffalo horn pieces on the Bushido ones, but not every one of them has had it. And then, there we go. You might be able to see something. Web cameras are not great for seeing this kind of stuff, but this one has a really subtle hata on it. I've had other Bushidos that have had very bold patterns. Hanwei folded steel is, I don't know, I've seen so much of it that it doesn't have the same kind of zazz that it used to. I got some schmutz on the end here. Looks like I gotta clean this Bushido. So I'm glad I found it because there's a little stain at the end that needs attention. But yeah, there are other elements here that I think they did really well on. The black patina around here. There's a saying about Fuji and some folks fighting, and the gold rim around it. I think they aesthetically designed the sword really well. It's very handsome. And if that is a larger factor than maybe how well it wax mats, then I think that it's a solid option for $1,000. Can't even see him. That's right. That's right. I broke the rule. Danimal, I recently picked up a practical special. It's the lightweight katana. Yep, the practical lightweight one. I like it a lot. It's really simple, feels great to move around. I want to say that I've had a practical special before. And all of the practical line is generally, I don't know that it presents as good a value as it once did, but for a very, very long time, they were very cost effective in comparison to what else was out there. And generally speaking, were pretty solid tools for practice. Will you post this video up on your site later today? Yes. Anytime I do a stream, they just kind of show up there when I'm done with them. So the rest of them will be there. There won't be too much more, though. I didn't plan on streaming for too much longer than an hour. So that is my plan. And I have a Bushido absolutely beautiful piece. Gorgeous Simone, but I'm not a fan of the weight and balance personally. I find the Suba makes it feel a little chunky. I always thought the Bushido was a little bit more of an in-between. It's not a light sword. I want to say, I can't remember the exact weight, but it's under 3 pounds. And so weight-wise, it tends to be in the middle of things. It feels a little stout and choppy. It feels like it could probably, block a few things. And at the same time, it's not as cumbersome as some of the XL or like really, really beefcake blades out there. So if you only had one sword and you wanted something that was kind of could be used for EI, could be used for cutting, whatever you happen to want. And I think it walks well between those things. Unfortunately, it doesn't do either particularly well then. Real Swords, hello. I don't have any mystery projects that you could spontaneously derail the stream with by saying like, I'll fix it. And I just stop. Real Swords, incidentally, has a channel, and you should check it out. And yes, got sidetracked by a piece of candy. If you get a Bushido, please check it out. Please, and check it again, as I got one with many issues in a scratch and dent sale. Well, that's kind of the thing I've found with Hanwei. And in fairness, a lot of the things that I bought have been secondhand, so it's not as though I have a ton of experience buying them brand new from Hanwei, though I have gotten some that have been, not used and bought directly. But there's just things that can go wrong. It seems like sometimes they're firing on all cylinders, and you get some nice stuff. The Peach Monkey, for example, is one that stood out in my mind as a sword I recently checked out. It's from a while ago, but the diamonds looked okay, and things were pretty tight, and the blade was overall well made, and all the things seemed pretty well nipped and tucked. So if you spent a fair amount of money on that sword, then I don't think you would be overwhelmingly disappointed, given that, while there are opportunities for improvement, they were not as abundant as they often are. At the same time, I've seen Hanweis, that are effectually new and come with loose ito and kind of weird shaped handles and fittings that are loose and rattly, and blemishes on the blade, or things that are blades where if you hold them out, that the blade is canted one way, or not kind of resting straight in the handle. Or sometimes they, if you look down the blade, it'll kind of cant off one direction or something like that. So there's or cracksuka, that's another one where you take the handle off and the ska core is cracked. And so those have all been things that I've seen on what are effectively new pieces from Hanwei, or pieces that I bought secondhand that supposedly weren't used. And I think people that have bought them new from Hanwei, or authorized distributors, have found some of the same things. So any sword you get, you want to make sure it's up to snuff, and that you've gotten what you're paying for. Sirp, I used to be, I missed one. The other token, I got a Musashi XL, which was perfect. Well, that's interesting that you like the Musashi XL, but not the Bushido, because I would think the Musashi XL is a chunkier blade. Maybe it just feels better in the hand. That's odd, though, that you would think the Bushido was cumbersome. Or maybe that's not what you said. All right, Sirp, I used to be an Iaido practitioner long ago, so Bushido felt hefty next to my old Hanwei Dragonfly. I can imagine it would. Does cut well, though, but the Bushido is the only one I have left now. The Dragonfly from Bouquet was that was a fun, lively little sword. I gotta say, Murasame katanas are nice. It was Bird's recommendation. Good, but fake Hamon at the bottom. At least the one that I got. He seems pretty happy with the Murasame brand. That's one that I have never checked out. I should probably reach out to them and request one. See if I can get a Murasame sword to finally test out. On the Bushido, I got the tip was black and slightly thicker on one side than the other. Cracksuka, terrible seppa, blade rattles at the Koiguchi, but the ito is really tight. Cost 450 pounds. That's, well, at least from what I understand, if you're in the UK and you found a Bouguet for 450 pounds, even with all those issues, that's probably still a pretty solid deal. The slightly thicker tip on one side is a little odd, but not too bad. A cracksuka you can find some remedy to, in theory. Many of them are cracked, but you can try to apply wood glue or something to secure it, and tighten it back down, and then shave the Nakago down a little bit. Take some gentle files or something and see if you can get it to fit in there better without cracking things, or take a rasp or something to make a little bit more space in the Nakago, or not in the Nakago, in the ska. Seppa are not too bad to replace. Wiggling at the Koiguchi is usually just a shim. But $450, at least as I understand it, when you try to buy a Bushido in the UK, it's like MSRP plus is usually what you guys get dealt with. So I would say if you got one at 450 pounds, then that is technically below the MSRP in the US. And so even with all those issues, it may not be too bad. Is modern steel far better than Tamahagane? It depends, Abdal. Tamahagane can be very effective steel, and it can be really well suited to swords, and it can be very good. Generally speaking, though, no, it's not better for sword-like stuff when you're talking about a steel that is also very good for swords and also competently made and heat treated. Often the thing people compare is a very well-crafted Japanese-made sword from Tamahagane by a competent smith using the material Tamahagane or presumably nice steel from a bloomery process, versus a relatively inexpensive, mass-produced and not well-attended Chinese-made sword from a mass production company. And in those cases, it's entirely possible that the Tamahagane is going to yield a superior sword, but that's not really fair to compare. If you take a sword made of 1060, which is a pretty available and abundant steel in China, and you had somebody make a competent smith make it and heat treat it deliberately so that you were sure that it was giving you the potential of that steel, in all likelihood, I think it would perform better than Tamahagane would. Depending on the test, there's not, but if the test was beating it against a metal pole in your backyard, I'd venture that the 1060 steel would hold up better. Must say, Zisei is making some really nice swords. Durability is questionable, though. The sword that I got from Zisei to test out was on the lighter side, and so it's not a surprise that it broke. I would say there are opportunities in their fittings and whatnot, but the blades that they make do look really nice. You did fix all the issues in your Bushido. To be fair, I used a wood saw, dust and glue, and so it's all good. What are your thoughts on Dragon King, Matt? They have cheaper and expensive swords. Thinking about getting a Dragon King Hana. I've had the Winter Sun. I've had 2 of those, and I've had 2 of the Spring Sakura swords. And I think those are on the lower end line from Dragon King, and I, generally speaking, like them. It seems like they have many of the same pros and cons as Hanwei, so it's really hard for me to separate them, because I think they're made by people that are either associated with or were associated with Hanwei, and it seems like all of the pros and cons went with them. so I would hope that the unique shapes, right? A lot of swords from Longquan have a kind of a really bog standard shape to them that allows them to share parts and fittings and have similar size, but they're all like about a 27 or 28 inch blade. They all have the same curvature. They tend to have the same thickness. They tend to start and finish roughly in the same place. So there's very little variation in the shape that you see in most reproduction houses that make katana. But Hanwei makes a lot of different varieties of shapes in katana. So I'm glad that Dragon King took that. I'm glad that Dragon King makes unique designs that are really themselves, and it doesn't look like it's made from the same parts bin. They have their own fittings. They have their own designs. They have a model that you can go buy. I think that's really cool. And the casting quality on the fittings also looks pretty good on the grand scale. So as wall art, I think the design and fittings look good. The downside is they still have loose ito, misshaped diamonds. They still have some wavy lines every now and again on the blades. They still have more or less the same kind of kind of things that you would find on a Hanwei sword was my experience with the Dragon Kings that I've had. I've had much fewer of them than I have of Hanwei, and so I would approach them personally with the same expectations. And if you're happy with what Hanwei delivers, then I would say you're likely to be happy with what Dragon King delivers. Personally, though, I would have loved to see like take all the good and leave the bad, and like bring, step up the quality, because it certainly can be done. If I look at what Huawei does with handles, they do a pretty solid job, and so it can be done. There are people that tie, and Skydro has generally speaking not been too bad, at least with Itomaki on the various ska and whatnot. Who else does it well? Those are the ones that come to mind that stand apart as doing it well. And every now and again, you get a good example of somebody that tied a handle well. And I would have loved to see like just some of the quality control stuff stay with Hanwei and not make its way to Dragon King, but that didn't seem to happen. All right. Any recommendation for katana parts on the cheap? Unfortunately not. It depends on what you're after. If you're looking for basic stuff, eBay sometimes is really the best spot to go. You every now and again can get lucky with a Suba that nobody bids on, and it goes for pretty cheap. And if you're patient, you can generally assemble a whole fitting set. Supposedly there are like Yahoo auctions in Japan that will send stuff, but I have not partaken of those myself. And every now and again, if you go to like sword shows and stuff like that, you can compile pieces together to get something that isn't terribly expensive. Those tend to be. Otherwise, a lot of times fittings are, they're not terribly inexpensive. All right. Dragon King was headed by Paul Chen's apprentice, which is why they're so similar. Most of the staff are ex-CAS employees as well. Well, that would make sense. They're just, I would have thought that they were a derivative of Hanwei, more or less, because if I took any Dragon King sword and just said it was Hanwei, I don't think it would stand up, like it wouldn't be unbelievable or anything, right? If you took a piece of Skydro and threw it into Hanwei, it would stand out. Some of the not that necessarily the swords are overall difficult, but like they just seem to have a similar dissimilar styles in terms of the way they approach fittings and stuff like that. But a lot of the stuff from Dragon King, the way they cast, the types of designs that they have are, and oddly enough, just all the problems too. It's not a question, just an interesting anecdote from Gail Faber, a French blacksmith I spoke to recently regarding a sword order. During our discussion, he taught me that we found cavalry sabers in France with an HRC of 35 because at the time it was preferred a sword bent rather than broke. Not a surprise. I'd have to imagine so, at least in the testing that I've done. Most of the time when the swords are harder, they tend to chip, break, or shatter easier than a soft one. And one of the hardest swords to break, I've talked about the ones that performed well, like the Dojo Pro or the S7 katana from Cloudhammer. But a while ago, there was a 1045 sword from Romance of Men, and it was really, really tough to break. It took a lot of bending and shenanigans in order to get this through-hardened 1045 sword to break, as well as like the $50 katana from Musashi. It took lots of bending and futzing around, and smashing it against a metal pole didn't break it. It would just kind of deform and bend, and then I could straighten it out, and it would bend again, et cetera, et cetera. And so the really soft swords that aren't as hard tend to deform, but then you can straighten them out and you still have a weapon. And I can understand how in a situation regarding or where you have limited access to tools, that a sword breaking may mean your life, but a sword losing its edge was something that maybe you could resolve at a later date. So I can understand why the soft sword may be appreciated depending on the circumstance. All right. I'm going to call it here, everyone. I appreciate you hopping on for a random stream and letting me babble on for the better part of an hour around, or looks like 1 hour. I hit the hour mark about nothing in particular and keeping the conversation lively. I appreciate it. I'm going to hop off though, and I will hopefully have some videos in the not too distant future. Cheers and thanks for watching.